Imagine a creature that carries the DNA of the most terrifying predator in history, but stands no taller than a human. It stalks the humid jungles of late Jurassic China, moving with the grace of a bird and the lethality of a raptor. On its head sits a spectacular hollow crest, a delicate crown of bone that seems entirely out of place on a killer. This is Guanlong wuyaii. While the world worships the massive Tyrannosaurus rex, this slender pioneer was the one that started it all. Long before the era of bone-crushing bites and multi-ton bodies, Guanlong was the blueprint for a dynasty. This is the story of the crowned dragon and the treacherous death pits that preserved its legacy for 160 million years. The story of Guanlong began in 2006 in the remote and desolate Yungar Basin of northwestern China. This region, specifically the Shishugu Formation, is a treasure trove of Jurassic life, but the conditions of the find were unlike anything paleontologists had ever seen. A team led by the world-renowned Dr. Xu Xing discovered what would later be described as prehistoric death pits. These pits were actually deep footprints made by a sauropod, a massive, long-necked dinosaur that had been filled with volcanic ash and mud. Over time, these became literal quagmires. Animals that stepped into the mud were trapped, and their struggling attracted predators who, in turn, became trapped themselves. In one of these vertical pits, the team found two skeletons of a new theropod stacked on top of one another. One was a mature adult, approximately 7 years old, and the other was a juvenile, around 6 years old. The preservation was so exquisite that it allowed scientists to see every detail of their anatomy, from the tips of their claws to the bizarre structure on their skulls. They named the creature Guanlong, which translates from Mandarin as crowned dragon, an acknowledgement of the striking crest that defined its appearance. The most defining and perplexing feature of Guanlong is the large bony crest running along the midline of its snout. Unlike the solid, heavy crests of some later dinosaurs, the crest of Guanlong was remarkably thin and hollow. It was less than a few millimeters thick in some places, supported by large internal chambers. Biomechanical analysis confirms that this structure was far too fragile to be used in combat. It would have shattered instantly if used as a weapon for ramming or defense. This leads scientists to the conclusion that the crest was a purely decorative organ, much like the feathers of a peacock or the antlers of a deer. The crest likely served as a visual signal for intraspecies communication. It could have signaled sexual maturity, social rank, or even helped individuals recognize each other in the dense Jurassic forests. Because the crest was hollow, some have speculated it might have functioned as a resonance chamber for vocalizations, though this remains difficult to prove without soft tissue evidence. What is certain is that Guanlong invested a significant amount of biological energy into growing this elaborate headgear, suggesting that social interaction was a vital component of its survival. When Guanlong was first unearthed, its significance was not immediately clear. It looked like many other small, three-fingered theropods of the time. However, detailed cladistic analysis, the study of evolutionary relationships, revealed a shocking truth. Guanlong was a member of the Tyrannosauroidea, the superfamily that includes the Tyrannosaurus rex. Specifically, it was placed in the family Proceratosauridae. This makes Guanlong one of the earliest and most primitive tyrannosaurs ever discovered. It provides a missing link that shows how the tyrant lineage began. Looking at Guanlong, you can see the seeds of greatness. It possessed the characteristic D-shaped teeth in the front of its snout, a trait shared by all tyrannosaurs for stripping meat from bone. It also had the fused nasal bones that would later allow T-Rex to exert its legendary bite force. Guanlong is the evidence that the greatest predators the world has ever known started as small, agile hunters in the shadow of other giants. While later tyrannosaurs are famous for their two-fingered, tiny arms, Guanlong was very different. It possessed relatively long arms with 3 functional fingers on each hand. These fingers were tipped with sharp, recurved claws, indicating that Guanlong relied heavily on its hands to grasp and subdue its prey. Its body was built for speed and agility. Guanlong reached a length of about 3 meters and weighed roughly 70 to 100 kilograms. It was a slender, long-legged runner with a stiff tail for balance during sharp turns. Its neck was long and S-curved, and its skull was elongated, quite unlike the boxy, robust skulls of its distant descendants. The hind limbs of Guanlong show that it was a digitigrade walker, meaning it walked on its toes. The proportions of the lower leg bones suggest it was a fast sprinter, capable of chasing down the small lizards and early mammals that scurried through the Jurassic undergrowth. It was a precision killer, using its speed to close the distance and its grasping hands to hold the victim while its blade-like teeth did the work. Guanlong did not live in a vacuum. The Shishugu Formation was a complex, multi-layered environment that was both beautiful and deadly. The landscape was dominated by giant sauropods like Mamenchisaurus, whose necks could reach lengths of over 9 meters. Guanlong would have lived in the shadows of these behemoths, likely avoiding them to escape being stepped on. However, Guanlong was not the top predator. That title belonged to Monolophosaurus, a larger theropod that also possessed a singular crest on its head. There was also Raptor, a formidable allosauroid that would have viewed Guanlong as a competitor or even a prey item. To survive in this world of giants, Guanlong had to be smart and fast. It likely occupied a mid-level niche, hunting smaller dinosaurs like the herbivorous Yinlong, one of the earliest relatives of the ceratopsians, and various primitive crocodiles like Yungarsuchus. The environment was a humid, seasonal forest, with plenty of water sources, which also meant it was prone to the mud trap events that led to the discovery of the species. One of the most debated aspects of Guanlong is its outward appearance. Did it have the reptilian scales of a traditional movie monster, or was it covered in a coat of primitive feathers? While no direct feather impressions were found with the Guanlong skeletons, the evidence from its relatives is overwhelming. Other members of the tyrannosauroid lineage, such as Dilong and the massive Yutyrannus, have been found with clear evidence of filamentous feathers. Given its position in the family tree and its relatively small size, it is almost certain that Guanlong possessed a coat of dino fuzz. These feathers would not have been for flight. Instead, they served as insulation to regulate body temperature and were likely used for display. Imagine the crest of Guanlong not as bare bone, but covered in vibrant skin, or even feathers, making it a flashy and unmistakable presence in the jungle. This bird-like appearance is far more accurate than the scaly depictions of the past, aligning Guanlong with the modern understanding of theropod biology. What was it like to see through the eyes of a Guanlong? Thanks to CT scanning technology, we can look inside the brain case of this ancient predator. The scans reveal that Guanlong already possessed the advanced sensory equipment that would define the Tyrannosaur dynasty. The olfactory bulbs, the parts of the brain responsible for smell, were proportionally large. This suggests that Guanlong had a keen sense of smell, allowing it to track prey or find carcasses over long distances. Furthermore, the structure of its inner ear indicates a sensitivity to low-frequency sounds. This would have been useful for hearing the heavy footsteps of distant sauropods or the low-pitched calls of other dinosaurs. Its eyes were large and positioned slightly toward the front, suggesting at least some degree of binocular vision and depth perception, which is essential for an active hunter. Guanlong was a sensory-driven animal, perfectly tuned to the sights, sounds, and smells of its Jurassic home. The discovery of two individuals in the same pit provided a unique opportunity to study how Guanlong grew. By looking at the growth rings in the bones, much like the rings of a tree, paleontologists determined that the two animals were at different stages of life. The juvenile was in a period of rapid growth, while the adult had reached its full size, and its growth had slowed significantly. Interestingly, the crest on the juvenile was much smaller and less developed than the crest on the adult. This confirms that the crest was an ontogenetic feature, meaning it changed and grew as the animal matured. This supports the idea that the crest was used for social or sexual signaling. A juvenile would not need to signal for a mate or defend its status in a hierarchy, so it did not yet possess the elaborate headgear of an adult. The tragic death of these two individuals in the death pit provided a snapshot of a species in transition, showing the biological development of an early tyrannosaur in unprecedented detail. It is a striking exercise to place Guanlong next to its descendant, Tyrannosaurus rex. The differences are massive, yet the lineage is clear. T. rex was over 12 meters long and weighed 8 tons, while Guanlong was only 3 meters long and weighed less than a large human. The most obvious change is in the arms. Guanlong used its long, 3-fingered hands as primary tools for hunting. Over the next 80 million years, as the tyrannosaurs grew in size, their heads became their primary weapons. Their bite force increased exponentially, and their arms shrunk until they were the 2-fingered appendages we know today. However, the core tyrannosaur traits are all there in Guanlong. The fused nasal bones, the specialized front teeth, and the structure of the hips all point toward the eventual rise of the king. Guanlong was the agile, feathered ancestor that laid the groundwork for a biological empire. It proved that the tyrannosaur strategy was successful from the very beginning, even at a smaller scale. The geological context of Guanlong is as important as the dinosaur itself. The death pits of the Shishugu Formation were caused by a specific combination of volcanic activity and sauropod migration. The area was a flat floodplain that was frequently covered in thick layers of ash from nearby volcanoes. When heavy rains fell, this ash turned into a deep, heavy mud. When a multi-ton sauropod, like Mamenchisaurus, walked through this mud, its feet would sink deep into the ground. As it pulled its foot out, the suction created a deep, vertical hole. These holes then filled with more mud and ash, creating a perfect hidden trap. Small theropods like Guanlong could not see the traps under the surface. Once they stepped in, they were doomed. The struggling of one animal likely attracted others, leading to the stacking of skeletons found by the excavation team. This rare geological phenomenon acted as a natural time capsule, preserving the delicate bones of Guanlong, which would have otherwise been destroyed by scavengers or the elements. What did Guanlong eat? As a hypercarnivore, its diet consisted almost entirely of meat. Its teeth were serrated and shaped like steak knives, perfect for slicing through muscle and skin. Unlike the puncture and pull strategy of later tyrannosaurs, Guanlong likely used a slash-and-grip method. It would use its speed to lunge at a victim, biting down on soft tissue while using its powerful arms to prevent the prey from escaping. It likely targeted animals smaller than itself. Small ornithischian dinosaurs, mammals, and even the young of larger dinosaurs were on the menu. The 3-fingered hands were essential for this style of hunting, providing a level of dexterity that later tyrannosaurs would lose. Guanlong was a versatile hunter, capable of navigating the complex, multi-layered environment of the Jurassic forest to find its next meal. Guanlong changed our understanding of dinosaur history. Before its discovery, the early history of the tyrannosaurs was largely a mystery. We knew they reached their peak at the end of the Cretaceous, but we didn't know where they came from. This animal showed us that the tyrannosaurs did not start as giants. They spent millions of years as small, secondary predators, honing their senses and refining their biology. It also proved that elaborate ornamentation was a part of their identity from the very start. The crowned dragon reminds us that evolution is a long, slow process of refinement. Every feature of the Tyrannosaurus rex, its smell, its teeth, its power, has its roots in a 3-meter-long feathered hunter with a bony crown. Guanlong is a testament to the endurance of a lineage that would eventually conquer the world. Guanlong was the elegant pioneer of the most famous dinosaur family in history. It did not need the massive size or the bone-crushing bite of its descendants to be a master of its environment. With its spectacular crest and its bird-like agility, it ruled the Jurassic jungles of China with a unique blend of beauty and lethality. Its discovery in the treacherous mud pits of Shishigu opened a window into the humble beginnings of the tyrant king. While it may have died in a trap, its legacy survived to tell the story of how a small, crowned dragon became the ancestor of a legend. If you want to continue exploring the deep history of the world's most incredible creatures, please consider subscribing to this channel. We are dedicated to bringing the latest scientific discoveries to life, with the drama and detail they deserve. Your support allows us to keep uncovering the mysteries of the prehistoric past. What do you think was the true purpose of that spectacular crest? Tell us in the comments below.